Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Fantasy sports today, each and every Sunday morning with Joe Pisapia and Matt Stryker, getting you ready for the upcoming fantasy baseball season and draft season officially underway and some key decisions to make. And we thought that on this show in particular, we'd start off by keeping it simple, Joe, because I think a lot of folks are still just kind of getting back into it at this point. A lot of folks are not like you and I. But welcome back to NewsWire. It's great to move over from football to some baseball. And boy, this first round of fantasy baseball honestly looks a lot like last year's first round in fantasy baseball, at least with a few players here, especially at the top. It's always the age-old question. Do you take a guy like Ohtani number one overall because he's only a designated hitter? But then again, you get him as a pitcher in some of these leagues. And then you see there are some others, Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt, Soto, Jose Ramirez back in the first round, Acuna back in the first round. And then the question is, do you take a pitcher in the first round? That's a lot for me to get to before even saying hello.
Well, hello. Oh, hello, Craig Mish. Yeah, look, it is usual suspects, and that's not a bad thing because that means last year the guys you drafted at the top of the draft actually delivered, and they're worth drafting there again. That's not always the case every single year. It means most of those guys stayed healthy and delivered. And that is a very positive thing. Ohtani, obviously, a lot of it has to do with the rules, as you're saying. If he is just the DH still, I still think he's the number one player. He's a guy capable of a 50-50 season. There's not a lot of those guys. He doesn't play the field, so he has, a little lower injury quotient on that front, but he is pitching again. So then you can make that argument against that as well. But if he qualifies at pitcher and hitter, obviously he is by far the best asset you could possibly have because you have two players in one. I know there's been a lot of disagreement about why he should be separated out into two. I don't understand why, because he's one man, he's one guy. He should be just that number one overall guy. I mean, I never understood. Like, is he somehow a split personality? He still goes on. He's not artificial intelligence.
Why is this? I
don't know. I don't know. It's people trying to bend the rules of time and space and try to make excuses. Aaron Judge obviously is the second guy here with good reason. Aaron Judge delivering another good season for the New York Yankees. Obviously 53 home runs of his own, 114 RBI, hit 330 last year. He does give you some stolen bases too, probably give you about, double digits, somewhere in that range. I would be honest. Chisholm's okay. I don't think he's super reliable. Bellinger had a great year. Will he repeat it? We'll see. He's been up and down before, although Yankee Stadium was very, very beneficial for him. And then you have the next grouping here, Bobby Witt, the premium shortstop with power, with speed. You're seeing Juan Soto coming off an incredible first year with the Mets, and that's considering it was such a slow start to the year, right? Still ended up with a career high in home runs, had 105 RBI, and a massive career high in stolen bases too, 37, which absolutely nobody thought of. And Craig, it kind of bears the question a little bit here. Soto's younger than Judge, obviously more stolen bases than Judge. Maybe, right. if Judge's power goes back into the 40s, one could argue Juan Soto might be the better investment, especially with some of the moves the Mets made this offseason to get more on-base skills around him and in front of him and some more protection behind him.
Yeah, and no, it's fair to ask if Soto's going to continue that stolen base production from a fantasy standpoint. I think you're 100% right, Joe, at that point, if he does it again, basically this year. So the question always becomes this time of the year, and again, I understand we're in February here. Not a lot of folks are doing this. Is that do you draft a pitcher in the first round of fantasy baseball? Because once you make that sort of investment, you better back it up and make sure you have the best pitching, or else it's sort of pointless to draft just one great pitcher. So Tarik, Skubal, clear first round pick. Of course, Paul Skenes in this conversation as well. You're going to draft, I'm going to guess, more teams than most people. How many squads will you have, Joe, with a pitcher as your first pick in fantasy baseball?
Well, these are two very specific questions, right? So the latter one, how many will I have? Not many in that first round, because it's just not how I like to build my rosters. To me, there's always quality pitching you're going to find in rounds 3, 4, 5, 6, and then some names that I like a little bit later on that I think are undervalued. Plus, we all know the volatility of pitching. Sometimes when you invest so early in pitching and that pitcher goes down, it can really sink your entire roster. I like to build a staff full of 1As and number 2s as opposed to just having that massive ace, because the problem is the premium offensive talent all goes in the first 3 rounds. And those guys you can't replace. Every year we get young pitchers who burst onto the scene and make an impact. Every year we can stream pitchers. Every year there's guys who take that next leap. It's really difficult to find premium offensive talent on the waiver wire or in the middle of the season. It doesn't exist. So for me, in terms of my roster construction, I'm not somebody who likes to do that and do the first round pitcher. I do have a first round grade on Paul Skenes and on Tarik Skubal in terms of overall best investments. I would say around 10, 11. I think that's where I feel comfortable taking those guys because, again, you want to take them before the turn, right? One of those guys because pretty much those guys like Vlad, Nick Kurtz, the guys that are going to slip into the second round or the guys even at the turn, you're going to get one of those guys on the way back. That I'm fine with. But I do think it's really difficult if you're in the middle of a draft at 6, 7, or even 8 to take a Skenes or a Skubal and then really like offensively what you put together. I think it's a very difficult build.
Joe, I think the World Baseball Classic is awesome, and I think everyone's going to enjoy it maybe more this year than ever before. As good as it was last go around, I think it's even going to be better. But unfortunately, the fantasy community are very crabby about it and don't love it because they think that there's a chance that their guys are going to get hurt in the World Baseball. And by the way, that could be true. I mean, they're going to be, if not going at it at 100%, they're going at it at 90%, which is not generally what you do in spring training. Is there any strategy for you at this time of the year, let's say next 2-3 weeks, where you say, I got to be careful a little bit? The Edwin Díaz injury the last time, well, that was very freak injury, but
It
I'm going
was.
to guess, unfortunately, we're going to come out of this with something. I mean, it's not going to be nothing, I'm going to guess at the end.
It probably is. I'm where you are. Even though I'm a fantasy nerd, I actually enjoy the WBC. It's really fun. It's gotten better over the years, too. I think every incarnation of it has gotten better. And it seems like the guys actually care more about it every single time we see it. And you're right, there are going to be injuries, but let's not forget we had 3 premier players in fantasy all get hurt on the same day with the same injury, and they barely picked up a bat. All right. So the handmade bone brothers, as I'm calling them, when you have Jackson Holliday and Corbin Carroll and Francisco Lindor, basically within a couple hours of each other, all having handmade bone injuries, and all within a couple days of each other having some sort of surgery or some sort of procedure. So injuries are going to happen in spring. Let's just caveat that. Am I concerned a little bit with anybody? Most concerning, maybe for me, Craig, to be honest, is probably the starting pitchers because you don't want guys ramping up too quickly and then they're pitching in what's, some people like to call labor intensive innings, right? Where all of a sudden these games matter, there's high pressure and a little bit more on these guys in terms of how they have to deliver in these moments in March. I think that is a
Right.
lot to ask sometimes, but it seems like the teams have a pretty good grasp on what they want these guys to do, how they want them to be used, and the context of all of them. And the pitchers, I think, are the one you have to pay attention to. You will see a lot of bullpen arms, though, being used too. Starting pitchers aren't going 6 innings in these games. Maybe they should hold the WBC till next year, just in case we don't have a little bit more baseball. I wish they would have done that. That would have been fun. We could just play WBC all year, right? That would
Right.
be fun. But I will say this, Craig. I'm pro WBC. Injuries are going to happen in spring no matter what. Yes, you do have to worry a little bit about some of the high leverage innings of some of these pitchers that are putting a little stress in stressful situations early on. That's not the best recipe, but I will say this, I think it's good for baseball, and we've seen it really catapult a couple guys having some good seasons too, getting off to a good start if you go back and track the last time we had this.
We'll see what happens here, Joe. I'm excited for that. We're coming up here. They start practicing next week, and then games shortly after that. And of course, spring training games begin this weekend. So enjoy that as well, Joe. Last thing before we go here, one other player that I wanted to mention to you that was a hot button topic on last week's show, on our side, me and George. Cal Raleigh. Cal Raleigh, highest catcher going in fantasy in a really long time as well. Do you believe in that ADP?
You look in 2 catcher leagues, I totally understand it. I wish people wouldn't play in 2 catcher leagues anymore. Seldom do they. It's an old industry adage and standard, but it seems to be wasting away as it should. I prefer him outside of the top 20. Right now, he's going inside the top 20. I would feel more comfortable with a guy like Kyle Schwarber or a guy potentially even like Jackson Churio before I would take Raleigh. Both those guys going after him. But even if he ends up hitting 40 home runs and has some sort of regression there, he's still far and away the best catcher on the board according to the relative position value.
All right, Joe. Have a great show Sunday. Thanks again for coming on.
Always a pleasure, my friend.